Good reminder.
Should be starting right now.
Okay. All right, so we'll call the order at 10:03. And so let's see, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yeah, I was asking, or I brought up Lisa, and assume Kathy, you're doing a report. Are there any changes in the open meeting law for just advisory committees? I brought that up.
I don't,
And
from what I saw, there weren't any changes, just more like reminders of the guidelines from the video. It was more to the decision-making boards, I think.
yeah, and that's what I was wondering. So I'll just bring it up and you just say there aren't any changes or whatever. But I'll add that just to say concerned about the open meeting law. Yeah.
Oh, and then the challenges with so we're a hybrid with like
we're a hybrid. That's the other thing, right? How that
and then
works.
advisory to the state librarian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The two different.
It's interesting. Okay. Josh?
Sorry, I literally don't know how I did that. So my apologies.
Oh.
I
Okay.
just want to check on something. So, as the official secretary, are we adding the topic is the board adding the topic of open meeting law to the meeting agenda, or?
I would like to, just so it's brought
Okay.
up, recorded that it's brought up.
Where in the agenda do you want to do that?
Probably your report, somewhere around there.
Okay, well, Lisa, does it sound okay to add it as agenda item between 6 and 7? So after the state librarian's report and before July meeting?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. See here. So I guess I don't want to rush people too. I mean, sometimes I tend to move these along a little faster than people like, so I want to make sure that I'm mindful of that. And if I do that, please just tell me to slow down. But if that topic is all set, then we can move on to topic 3, public comment, if there is any public comment. And if not, then we can move on to the approval of the minutes for January 14th of 2025. Hope that everyone got a chance to review them. Is there any discussion about that?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. Do we have a second?
I can second the motion to
Adrian?
approve the minutes.
Okay. And there's no discussion about that, so all in favor of approving the minutes from January 14th of 2025? Raise your hand or say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. All right, so moving right along. If there's no other discussion, then we can move on to the item 5, the FY 2026 budget update.
Hey, Lisa. I'm just gonna, I want to just introduce myself. I think we're so excited to get started. We forgot introductions. So if anybody were watching the video, I'm the state librarian, Catherine Delnow. I'm the commissioner of the Department of Libraries. And I'm joined by some other Department of Libraries staff on the call today. So I'll just mention their names so that folks know that everybody who's not on the board is one of our team. Jess Leal, who is valiantly helping with the minutes, our executive assistant for the team. Jeanette Schaefer, who is assistant state librarian for Library Advancement is here. Joy Warland, our consultant for small and rural libraries and continuing education, is with us. Lauren Kelly, our consultant for cataloging and technical services. And Karen Gravlin, who is our ABLE Library Director and Director of, going to get the title wrong, Inclusive Services. And then Josh Muse, who is our technology consultant for the department, are here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I apologize to the board for not getting you information in advance. It's been a very busy week, in part because of some of what, or very busy, I would say, month, in part because of some of what you'll hear about in the budget update. You should have received in the meeting invitation, there should be a PDF that has the full Department of Libraries or State Librarian report to the board for today, April 8th. And on the final pages of that is the budget update. So we'll talk about this topic first, but you do have the information in written form as well for later. And I believe it's already been posted online this morning. So to share where we are in the budget process, when we met back in January, I wasn't able to share very much about the budget because the governor had not yet delivered his budget address. So I had just shared some general information about the general guidance to departments of a 3% increase. And since that time, I presented our budget to the state and House committees on appropriations. Those meetings took place on February 7th and 11th. And interestingly, this year, I think we were in Senate appropriations first. Usually we're in House appropriations first. So it was a little bit of a flip-flop, but both committees seemed very receptive to the department's budget, which included a general fund appropriation of $2.37 million. So that is pretty consistent with what we've asked for in prior years. We had, if you look at the budget itself, and that document is posted, there's a link to it that's in the state librarian's report. If you look at the document itself, there's a page that we call the ups and downs where you can see the percent increase or percent decrease last year to this year. Probably the most confusing aspect of the budget presentations was explaining that there's actually no significant ups or downs anywhere. It's just a matter of how we are coding our invoices, that we've been on a kind of reforming project and trying to align our invoices with the cost centers that most appropriately reflect them. So while you see some amounts going up in one spot or going down in another spot, the overall request was very much the same as in prior years. We're not cutting a service or doing anything like that. It's really a matter of, you know, if we're purchasing a database, calling it kind of using all of our database codes, using all the codes the same way on invoicing, so it doesn't look like we're purchasing subscription services, which are more in line with how we think of magazines. So things of that nature. So there's not any significant difference. Something to just be aware of is that during the budget process, the department had successfully articulated its need to receive more than 3% budget increase to maintain its current services. So that with the general funds, we were asking for a little bit more money than the 3% baseline. And then a really important thing, which I'm confident everybody on this call right now is aware of, as are many, many members of the public who have tuned into the radio or TV or read a newspaper in the past month. A third of the department's budget is made up of a federal grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. We receive approximately $2.4 million. I think it's actually $2.37 million from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And we are not sure what's going on with that funding. I'm just going to pause for 1 second because I see a note in the chat from Linda. Linda, it's in the meeting invitation, the calendar invite. It should be an attachment. Do you see it there? Okay. So I'll continue on. And I think Josh has also posted the direct link. If somebody's having trouble finding the calendar invite, they can be a little bit persnickety. So the direct link to the reports in the chat as well. We just posted it this morning. So as I was saying, the department's budget is made up of roughly 66% general funds and 33% federal funds. And those federal funds are its grants to states allotment from the Institute of Museum and Library Services and their Library Services Technology Act, or LSTA funding. So there are a bunch of acronyms, but IMLS, I'm going to just use that term again and again, stands for Institute of Museum and Library Services. So on March 14th, there was a federal executive order titled Continuing the Reduction of the Federal Bureaucracy. And it was signed by the president on March 14th. It went into the Federal Register some days later. And that executive order may have impacts on the department's operational budget in the coming fiscal year. At this time, we really do not know what those impacts will be. So I want you to hold that in your head. Hold that in your mind, that we do not actually have an answer for this question yet. And we have not heard any communication specific to our state's grants to states allotment. We have not heard anything specific about termination of our grants for next year. There is no actual thing that we know. My brother, being my brother, pointed out to me that I was quoted in, I think, VT Digger saying something to the effect of, "What I don't know is a lot." That really gave him pleasure as my sibling. It does not give me pleasure as your state librarian to be in a state of unknowing, but I'm glad my family found it funny. Trying to find levity wherever we can. But so let me, with that in mind, with the fact that this is uncertain, we do not know anything specific as of this morning. Neither Jeanette Schaefer, who is on the call right now and who administers our IMLS grants to states grant, neither she nor I have received any notifications either in our email or in, I believe it's called EGMS Reach, which is the federal portal that we receive communications through typically. Jeanette has been checking over the weekend. She and I were on the road yesterday, doing some Capital for a Day visits to libraries throughout the day. Jeanette was diligently checking. We are concerned we might hear something, but we have not heard anything. So we need to move forward operating as if we are receiving that funding until we are told that we are not receiving the funding. And hopefully we will
And how
never
much is
be
that
told that.
amount again, Kathy? How much is that amount?
In 2024, it was 1.24, I think,
Okay.
roughly 1.24 million.
Because I thought you had said two something there. So and I
That's
knew it was
our,
like
the
that's our budget, right?
2.37 is the state
State,
funding, the general funds. And the IMLS
1.2,
allotment is 1.24 or
27.
was
Oh,
1.24
Yeah.
in 2024.
Okay. Yep.
So the department had used a placeholder in its 2026 state of Vermont budget. And the placeholder that we started with was the 1.24 million. And that's the placeholder that the department feels is most likely to be the amount of our award, or felt at the time was most likely to be the amount of our federal award. Remember that budget development starts at the end of the summer. So we had no reason at the end of the summer to think that anything else might happen. And in fact, as recently as March 18th of this year, the department heard from the deputy director of the Grants to States program at IMLS, and this was just days after the continuing resolution was passed. We heard from IMLS, a high-level administrator of this grant program, that and I quote from her email, "As we finalize the full year allotment schedule in our system, we will reach out to you with a final allotment table for the year." And that allotment table lists every state's award, including Vermont's. So they had not yet finalized that allotment table, but they had the continuing resolution. They had their funding through the continuing resolution, and they were working on developing the allotment table. She goes on to say, notwithstanding outside guidance, we expect the fiscal 2025 allotments to be similar to last year's allotments. So that idea we had that we would receive a similar amount, or that we will receive a similar amount to the amount that we received in 2024 allotment, is, it was a reasonable thing for us to think, because that is in fact what we were told in March by our colleague Terry at IMLS. She went on to say that they expected to make those announcements by the 22nd of April, but in some case that they weren't, in the case that they weren't able to do that, they would communicate about partial awards. So that's a little bit irregular. It's a little bit late in the game to be telling us these awards, but with everything going on with the continuing resolutions and that possible shutdown that we were watching around the 14th, this seemed relatively normal for us. Where things departed from normal, I would say, was with the issuance of the executive order, and then the uncertainty around what that would mean. And the department reached out to IMLS staff and requested the plan, because in the executive order, there was mention of a plan where IMLS would, the director would need to state what their statutory obligations were, and then also to what extent they would fulfill those obligations. So we really need to see that plan. And it was due within 7 days of the executive order being signed, or maybe within 7 days of the executive order being posted on the Federal Register. But both of those 7-day periods have elapsed. And when Jeanette reached out, and when I reached out to IMLS staff, they did not have something that they could share with us. I have heard that there were FOIA requests for that document that were placed. The department did not place a FOIA request, but I've heard from others who did place FOIA requests that the requests were denied, because my understanding of it is because they were plans and not an executable directive. So then on March 31st, we heard from a colleague, again, a high-level administrator of the Grants to States program, that all IMLS staff were to be placed on administrative leave. And then on April 4th, we heard from our specific program officer that she was informed in writing that her separation date from IMLS was April 5th. So at this point, what we know is that we have not been told who replaces our existing program officer, if anyone. We know that she is no longer working at IMLS. And we also know from colleagues in other states that the other two program officers communicated the same information to their states. And these communications came from people's personal emails. They have not had access to their emails since they were placed on administrative leave. So those are things we know. We don't know, does the federal government have some other way that it plans to administer these grants? Will they be moved to a different department? Will they continue on? At what level will they continue on? Who will administer them if they do continue on? We also know that one of the things that the Institute of Museum and Library Services does is to collect data and information. One of Josh Muse's jobs when he's not helping us with technology is coordinating this behemoth of a federal survey called the Public Library Survey. And he also coordinates the State Library Administrative Agency survey. So we survey collectively, the state libraries survey all the public libraries in the country and feed their state data up to folks who are at IMLS. And collectively, all of the state libraries report on their own activities and feed that data up to IMLS. And there's a company called AIR, AIR. It's an acronym, and I have been told that they have that their contract with IMLS was terminated. So we have reason to believe that the data functionality of IMLS has stopped. So that is what we know. We also know that last week, the state libraries of California, Connecticut, and Washington were notified that their 2024 grants to states awards. So that's like the money we're currently spending, most states. So the 2024 federal allocation is spent by many states in 2025. Those 3 states were told that their 2024 grants were terminated. The reason for that is not quite clear, to me at least. And then last week, the attorneys general of 21 states, including Vermont's Attorney General, Charity Clark, sued the federal administration related to the dismantling of IMLS or related to the threats to IMLS. And I've included a link to that litigation in your in the report that I gave to you. So now I'm going to just go back to the first thing I said, which is despite all of this information, we have not heard anything specific about Vermont's 2025 allocation. And I want to share that the department has already spent all of its 2024 allocation. We normally would spend it in a consistent way from July 1st of 2024 through June 30th of 2025. We accelerated our spending so that we could draw it down and spend the money within 30 days of the draw. So we have our normal stable funding through the end of this fiscal year for the state of Vermont, June 30th, 2025. So by being proactive about that draw and the spending of the funds, we have been able to have a bit of stability that some other state libraries may not have. And for that reason, some other state libraries whose circumstances may have been different, everybody responds to things in their own way. And I don't want to speak to what they've done. I'm glad that we did draw down the money and that we were able to do that. And I feel for those who haven't been able to do that. Some other states have started making cuts to their programs, and this can be very confusing for the public because there are 50 states and there are 50 responses. And some boards of libraries are in more of a directive role, like the Massachusetts Board of Libraries, and the state librarian, that's more of, they are her supervisors, and they've announced cuts. So people in Southern Vermont, I think that their Vermont services may have been cut, but it isn't their Vermont services. So there's some confusion going on right now. And this is also the case with our Able Library. We're having folks who are contacting us thinking that their service has been cut because they've heard from a person in another state that there are impacts to their similar service. But in Vermont, at the Department of Libraries, there has been no change to our funding or to our staffing levels or to the services due to these executive orders right now. So I want to just be really clear about that. And if there is a change, I will inform you very quickly of that change. And I want to just share with you that just like IMLS has statutory obligations, it has things in federal statute that it must do, and those are called out with the word shall, typically, in federal statute. In Vermont statute, 22 VSA has a description of what we must do, and the department will strive to continue to meet all of its statutory obligations, regardless of what funding it has available. Of course, the degree of service, the level of service would be different. If you think about your local libraries and their book budget, if there's less money overall, you might need to allocate fewer resources to a specific task while still continuing to provide materials. So we would need to make, once we know if there will be impacts, then we will need to make decisions about how to allocate the funds that we have available to us. But at this point, there's no change to our activities. So that is my very strange budget report, which is much longer than in most years. And I'm sure you can appreciate how confusing it is for us and for our team and for the public. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have to whatever extent I'm able to.
Not a question, Kathy, but to tell your brother, and this is a quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson, very smart man, and they complain that he didn't know something in science, and just because I know a lot doesn't mean I don't know, doesn't mean I know everything. And just because I don't know everything doesn't mean I don't know a lot. And that's your case. You have to take that.
I me
Just
add
because
you
I
to
know a
my
lot
text
doesn't
thread with
mean
my
I know
brother,
everything.
Tom.
Yeah, but just because I don't know everything doesn't mean I don't know a lot. Yes.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't even know what kind of question to ask. I think you were really clear, but it's nice to know that we haven't had to cut, haven't felt the need to do that yet. Or make any drastic changes based on something that hasn't really had an effect yet. Linda? I can't hear you.
Yeah, Linda has her hand raised, I think.
Yeah, she's talking, but I think there's an issue with her. Do you want to type in the chat or just a question? Okay.
Maybe, Josh, can you put the telephone number in the chat? Linda could call in if her audio's not working.
Can do.
Well, Rick, you have a question?
Yes, can you hear me first?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to commend you on the preemptive spend, the preemptive drawdown of that money. That was well played. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. And thank you, Linda. Linda wrote in the chat that she wanted to say thank you to our team for all the hard work and anxiety. It has been a really stressful period for us and for colleagues in other state libraries, and particularly for those folks, and really, I want to just, for people who worked most closely with IMLS staff, and in our team, I think that would be Jeanette and Josh. Their colleagues that they worked with all the time have been going through a lot. And I couldn't help but notice that even when they had lost their own jobs, the emails that they were communicating to us with were crafted with such care. It wasn't just, I'm out of here, this stinks, it was, okay, this is what you need to do. Keep logging in. Don't let your passwords expire. All communications, send it through this EGMS reach. Do this, do this, do this, do this. Make sure you do this reporting or that reporting on these times. They have always been trying to support library services. They are commendable the civil servants. They have been helping other libraries do the same types of things, other state libraries do the same types of things that we do every day with this money. Things like interlibrary loan, the network libraries of NLS. These are the databases for the community. There's not, these aren't the discretionary grants that IMLS issues. These are state funds that have been allocated every year for decades. And the interdependence of the federal funding, the kind of the interdependent relationships with the federal funding and the state funding blend, that 33%. It's not that the Department of Libraries is different from the other states. Most other states get about a third of that funding for their state library operations in that same type of a blend, where it's around a third of the funding. So these are services that are locally determined by the state library. There is a plan. The plan is being worked for the whole duration of the plan. Our current plan goes through 2027, and it was approved for that period of time. So we would expect to continue to receive that funding to support the approved plan for every year, at least through 2027. So I want to just say it's hard for staff, and I think these jobs that we have at the state have seemed pretty reliable. And the folks that we've brought to our team are experts in their field in our state. And it's really it's tough, I think, for them to imagine what comes next. And I know it's tough for us to live with that uncertainty. I'm trying to remain hopeful that if we haven't heard anything, kind of the no news is good news, but that feels a little bit strange and Pollyanna-ish, but that's where we try to just hope that this won't impact us. And I think Linda was able to join. Yeah. She's in on the phone now.
Yeah, it seems from all the things we hear about the IMLS, reaching out on their personal emails and things that they're really dedicated to helping the library, services around the area, the states. It's really dedication for sure.
Yeah. And I had met with IMLS staff at the beginning of March when I was in Washington, DC, and it was, the uncertainty that they had at that moment was palpable. And still knowing how important this federal entity is to library services across America, they were really upbeat and positive and trying to, reassure us as much as they could given the situation. And it's just very, they have been doing great work and they continued doing great work until their communications were cut off. So it's just very disheartening to think that anyone would think that, as the executive order says, that IMLS is unnecessary. I really strongly disagree with that.
I think
Is
we
there
all
anything
do.
we can do?
I think it's hard to know at this point what you can do. I think some of the other state library boards may have written letters to their representatives or to the acting director, Keith Sonderling. He's the acting director of IMLS. Um, I think whatever, if you do anything, of course, it's, what I'm saying is just information. I don't know what the best approach is for the board.
Linda?
Ooh, you'll need to *6 on your phone. Is that not? Sorry.
Never
Yep.
mind. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh my gosh. Wow, that's exciting. Thank you. Kathy, I can't imagine what this is like, what you're all going through. And I thank you for hanging in there and being the wonderful administrator that you are. I have a question about other aspects of the library grants, the grants that you all issued, capital projects grants, whenever they came out last fall, and then the second grant program that you were going to put out applications for. I wonder if you have any information about what the status of those are. And just for full disclosure, I'm interested because our library got a grant in that first round of granting. We haven't tried to ask for reimbursement yet, but I'm just curious if you have any information about those grants and whether they are still going to be available or not.
I do have information on that, and I've included it in the next agenda item, Linda. So
Okay,
can
fine.
we take more questions about that in that? Great.
Yep.
Or we can move to that if others are ready to, and Lisa wants to.
Well, Kathy, have you been reaching out to any of the other state of Vermont agencies? Because some of them are also of varying amounts funded by the federal government and may be going through lots of uncertainties. Is there any commonality? Some things different? Are those connecting?
We we have not been reaching out proactively to other state of Vermont departments or agencies. Each department or agency is dealing with their own situation. And at my level, my role is really to make sure that I'm facilitating that here in the department.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there are others in the state who are more in the administrative, in higher levels of state government who are looking more systemically at this
Mhm.
issue. You know, for example, if there were a secretary who had multiple agencies that were impacted, or, you know, the governor's office, I know, is aware of these impacts on folks. But
Mhm.
our role is really just looking at where we are right now, keeping abreast of it, keeping folks informed. But I mean, just by being a regular reader of the news, we know that there are a number of other departments and agencies that have funding that relates to executive orders, and that if you look on the AG's office website, you can see the cases that Vermont is involved in, and there are quite a few of those. So I think at the, you know, I don't want to pretend to be a deciding level in state government, but my sense is that just as we're waiting to see what are the specific impacts to our department, there are likely others who are in similar situations.
Mhm.
And until the totality of those impacts is known, it's very difficult for anyone to make decisions about that.
Mm.
And, you know, I was called back for some additional questions related to this topic from one of the appropriations committees. And hang on a second. I just muted Linda so that she could take her call. So they did have questions about, are there any known impacts yet? And the conversation with the elected official was really around that kind of uncertainty at the state level, that there's quite a bit unknown right now. And so it's difficult for, my sense is it's difficult to be looking at the budget, which is based on normal dynamics in a normal year.
Okay.
Okay, well,
Thank
if
you.
there's no other
Sorry. Thorough.
questions, we can move on to the next topic.
Okay.
I don't want to lose sight of also what Tom was saying about like what we could do to help. Or maybe the board wants to have separate conversation about this in a different agenda or meeting or committee, but or how we could stay up to date, because our next meeting is in July, which is anything can happen. A lot has happened every day, it seems, with the changes to the federal, you know, agencies and departments, and it's happening very fast. So it's something to consider.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good point. I mean, I've definitely, talked with Kathy a little bit, and, writing a letter to somebody might be something we could do. I don't know if there's any value in it right at the moment, but to think about that, and, you know, I don't know if we want to have a special meeting, between now and July, if things happen that we feel we should just, meet and discuss. It's also, tenuous right now, that it's kind of hard to make plans, I think. Well, that's my impression.
It also probably depends on what the department's communicating with us too.
Yeah, I mean,
And being responsive to that, and
yeah.
or is it just simply waiting?
That's the best thing, right? Just wait.
Sometimes best
Um,
option is to do nothing.
Yeah. I mean, right now, I think, I don't know if Kathy has other thoughts, but I think right now that's all we're able to do.
We all care very much and appreciate the thorough timeline and the straightforwardness of the status of everything. It's not easy wading through all of this, and I was able to see the whole trajectory well,
Mhm.
and so thank you. Not easy to
Yeah, for sure.
summarize. Complex situation that has many shifting parts or shifting sands.
For sure.
One of the one thing that we've been doing periodically is to just send out factual updates to the community. And I know that those of you who are on the listserv for the public librarians or trustees have received those. If you're not on those listservs, please connect with Josh, who can help to get you on those communication streams. We also had a lot of requests from libraries that had members of the public who were coming in who were concerned, wanted to know what was changing. And we had a one pager front and back, so really two pager, that I had brought to Washington, D.C. when I met with the congressional delegates. And by the way, I actually spent quite a lot of time with Senator Welch, and he sent me this photo, and I should share it with you because so he had the photographer was there with us. I mean, he really was quite engaged and very concerned, and he wrote on he signed it himself, and it happened to be my birthday, so I have this as my birthday card from Peter Welch. So appreciative, or so appreciate the work of our librarians. So that was just a really nice message. And I do know that, the congressional delegates in Vermont have specifically asked for the plan as well. Specifically, I know that from one of Senator Sanders' staffers. So they've been very supportive. And I think the thing that's confusing right now is that there's a lot of direction about what to do, and people are saying, call these three people. Well, Senator Sanders, Senator Welch, and Representative Ballant are very well aware of what's going on and are very supportive of IMLS and the department. And in fact, Representative Ballant signed on to a Dear Colleagues letter requesting that IMLS not be gutted. So there's, when Vermonters are kind of flooding the inboxes of those folks and the call centers of those folks, I don't know how helpful that is. Is it helpful because they log how many they received? I really don't know. But I do know that they are aware of what's happening, and I happened to be there for the annual, hey, IMLS is important, don't forget to fund it, conversations. I do know that, there are folks who are writing in support of the program and in support of the services that are provided through the program. And so I would just ask, no, we can't write to say we're upset. You can't write to say that you're upset that it's been cut. But the Vermont Library Association wrote in support of the services. There are other entities in our state that have supported the services and talked about how they're vitally important to library service in Vermont. And so the board is, of course, welcome to make decisions about whether it wishes to proactively have a statement of support for that funding source. But
Or other, yeah.
Okay. All right, then. Thank you. That was really helpful. And I really like being on the listserv. I think it's really helpful. So if you aren't on it, I highly encourage you to get on it because it's besides things that Kathy sends out, there's other library information, and I find it really informative. So I think we could move on to the state librarian's report now.
Sure thing. So I wanted to give a bit of happy news. We have a new consultant for government services and interlibrary loan, and her name is Carolyn Marks. Carolyn joined the department on February 9th, and she comes to us with a degree from Pratt Institute in New York, and she has previously worked at the Manchester Community Library in Vermont and at the Green Mountain Club and even at the MoMA in New York City. So Carolyn is taking
Hmm.
over the job that April Shaw had been in until she left to work at the Agency of Digital Services. And that role is Carolyn is currently overseeing interlibrary loan and also services to state employees and legislators and reference support, excuse me, reference support for the whole state. And so we're really glad to have her. Something that's already somehow been resolved in her short time here. I mean, really, she's only been here for 2 months, and there was a long time commitment from the University of Vermont to join the courier program. And there was a long time fumbling about on back of house settings on the ILL, I'm sorry, the ILL, ILS. I really am not even sure, but the catalog
Clover?
at UVM wasn't talking with Clover
Oh.
and they couldn't get it to talk with Clover. And Josh is nodding, so I think I'm saying the right things. And it was like 2 years. I mean, they had told the dean of UVM's libraries had told me back when Vermont State University was in the news because of their collections decisions. He had said, "What can we do?" And I said, "You could really be fully in on ILL, join the courier network." That's how long it took. And it was this very slow process. And then suddenly Carolyn, I guess, went to a meeting and it's now they're a part of Clover. So go, Carolyn. We're happy to have her. And she's joined the team and is making things happen. So it's great. She and Josh have been Josh Muse had been stepping up to do some of the things during the vacancy, and so had Lauren and Tom. And almost as soon as they got here, almost as soon as Carolyn got here, Josh and Carolyn did some outreach to, I think it was Department of Labor. So she's just hit I don't know what the phrase is. She's like firing on all cylinders and she just got here. That's what I'm trying to say. So great to have her as part of the team. And I know whenever we fill a key position that has been vacant, there's this sigh of relief from the others who have been carrying all the extra work for a time. So many thanks to everybody who stepped up to do some of that work during her absence. And that I'm sure includes the staff that she supervises as well, Vince and Linda. So we also have a plan to fill our contracts and grants administrator position. Likely to see somebody coming on board later this month. That position vacated back in December. And the impacts of that position have been largely falling on Jess, who probably wishes she never told me she knew how to process grant applications and agreements, because she's been doing the lion's share of the work with our summer reading grants. And we've also, with some of the capacity of one of our folks who's working on capital grants, because we're kind of waiting for some of those projects to get into full swing. Hannah Blair was able to step up and help to process those applications as well. And Tom and Jeanette have been writing their own contracts for continued service of the department. So we're all really excited to see that position fill and that individual to come up to speed. So watch this space. We'll be able to share more information soon. We do have another vacancy that is in our Able Library, and that one has been vacant since Sarah Blow retired after many years of service back at the end of December. And we have a new vacancy that has come up in our library advancement team, our operations consultant, whom some of you might know. His name's Kevin Unrath. He worked with the department for 2 years and he just had his last day last week, but he now will have one of the shorter commutes in Vermont libraries. I think he's taking a position at the Dorothy Alling Memorial Library in Williston, and he lives in the next town over. And he really missed library service to the community, I think, and we're going to miss Kevin a lot. He's been really a great asset to the team, but apparently he had told his wife when he joined our department that, well, there are 2 public library jobs I would go for still, and this was one of them. So we wish Kevin the best, and we know we'll still have chances to work with him. So we just wish him the best in his new role. Linda, to your questions about the capital grants, the next thing in my report is related to this. There has been some confusion from folks in the community, so I thought it was really important to include an update on this in this week and this month's report. The funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services that we've been talking about is completely separate from the U.S. Department of Treasury funding for capital projects, that 16.4 million that we already have selected the 14 subrecipients for. And it's also completely separate from the other funding, the $10 million from HUD that we have not yet launched the application period for that grant. And there have been no communications from Treasury or HUD to the department that signal that anything has changed with either the Treasury capital projects or the HUD capital projects. There was a list of programs that were supposed to be reviewed very, very early on in this administration's time. But we've not heard anything since that time. So as far as we know, everything is status quo with these programs. We have received, let me try to get this straight. We've received invoices for payment from 4 of the public libraries. That's Brandon, Judavin, Johnson, and Middletown Springs. And we have successfully received reimbursement in recent weeks for $2.1 million. So we are seeing that the reimbursements are being processed, and they're being processed quickly. It's actually the case that the slowest part of the process is getting the department reimbursed because the state requests payment. So let me describe what happens. Brandon Library completed their project. They submit their receipts. Our team, Hannah and Mark, review the receipts, determine if it's an approved use, if it's within the grant terms or not. And then we give them a check. So the state pays them back. Then at that point, we tell somebody in another state department and they initiate a request. And then the money comes back to the state, and then the money funnels back to the department. And that money is sequestered from our normal operations money. So it's not like it's coming out of our database money or our collections money or our staff budget money. So the reimbursement process has been working, and we have not heard anything else. Regarding housing and urban development, I will tell you that if anybody had said to me when we went for that congressionally directed spending that it was going to be housing and urban development and what that would look like for us, I might have paused before applying for that money, because it has been a long and arduous process. And finally, about 2 years after getting an award letter, I finally received an executed grant agreement. And I think that also came on my birthday, March 6th. But they didn't tell me. It was signed on March 6th, but nobody told me. And I had to just keep calling them and calling them and calling them. So what that looked like was we heard that the omnibus budget had passed in December 2022. I got really excited. I waited for a month. Finally, we got a note, a letter, an email that said, hey, you got this grant. Resubmit everything. So we had to resubmit everything we had already submitted. And then there were a bunch of forms in triplicate. And then every 6 months, somebody would tell me to revise something I had already corrected. So like if I wrote down dog, 6 months later, they would say, change dog to cat. And then another 6 months later, they would say, why did you put down cat? It really should have been dog. And that went on for 2 years. And we thought we were losing our minds. But finally, they gave us an executed grant agreement in March. So we have every reason to believe that we have $10 million in funding to support grants to public libraries in the state. These will be done in a different manner from the most recent Treasury grants. The Treasury grants are a lot of larger projects. These will be grants of up to $499,999. And they will likely be for specific projects. We're still fleshing out the program because I couldn't pay staff to work on the project until I had the executed grant agreement. So Jeanette and Tom and I were working on it as part of our departmental activities. But now that we have the executed grant agreement, we can engage the capital projects folks a little bit more. And we hope to, I think we're on track to launch that application this year. It's going to take a little bit of time to develop that. It has a whole separate set of rules from Treasury. And so we really need to set it up, being mindful of those rules, being mindful of the intention of these grants, which are really more about maintenance and repair than they are about expanding and dreaming big. So it's a different focus for these grants. Every library in the state will be eligible to apply, but preference will be given to small and rural libraries. And preference will also be given likely to those who did not receive other funding from the department or other congressionally directed spending, because that could be a little bit of a double dip. So if a library already got their own appropriation for congressionally directed spending, there may be some limits on that as well. But we'll make all of those requirements clear and all of those preferences clear when we do the application. But we also want to make the application a little bit, hopefully, easier, while still gathering all of the necessary information that we need to from the federal level. So we're looking forward to those. And if there were any changes with those, if somebody did communicate with us about any type of clawback, we would of course alert people right away, but I have not heard anything to that effect at all. So we're just moving forward with those grants. And of course I can answer more questions in the Q&A part, but the department is still trying to do all of its normal activities. So continuing education rolls right along. I met somebody just yesterday who told me that she had graduated from that she will be getting her certificate at the VLA conference this year. So, Joy and the team are doing great work with continuing education still. The Able Library is plugging right along, although quite frankly, nothing has been resolved with the National Library Service. And probably more questions have arisen than have been resolved with them, but I'm working through that on behalf of the department. But one of the things that's a real joy is to go out into the community and see folks. And just yesterday, if I'm looking tired, it's because Jeanette and I got up at the crack of dawn, met at the Northfield Park and Ride at 6:30. And if you know me, you know that that is not a comfortable thing. Jeanette looked great. She's probably been up for hours, but I was quite tired. And we drove all the way down to we went down to Proctorsville for the cabinet meeting, which is where people in the community have a chance to meet lots of folks from the cabinet and the extended cabinet, and the governor has us all go around and say where we'll be fanning out to in the county. And so we did Windsor County Capitol for a day. So we visited the Fletcher Memorial Library in Ludlow, the Hartford Public Library, and then Norwich Public Library. And that was really just great. And folks there had questions for us about the federal funding dynamic, but they also just wanted to share the great stuff that they're doing in their communities. I was really inspired by the visit to the Hartford Public Library, where they talked about how they do outreach to 4 different senior centers and senior living facilities. And they really have been doing this great work for the past, I think around 15 years. And it's a really established program, and the seniors rely on it, and they bring the books to the seniors because the seniors have trouble getting into the library, between accessibility issues, but also not being able to drive themselves anymore. So they really bring that library service out to the community. All 3 of these places have really robust youth services. And I would say the stars of the youth services shows have to be the Norwich Public Library, their children's room. I was like, oh my gosh, I might get a migraine from all the flashing lights and sparkling everything. I mean, it was decked out in the way that like 7-year-old Kathy would have just thought was amazing. You had to walk through like a sparkly doorway hanging that was just out of control. But the room was decorated with art made by the kids, and they really do a lot serving birth to 5th grade.
Mhm.
And they're trying to build their teen services to just keep moving along and building that. But they explained to us how their middle schoolers actually go to middle school in New Hampshire. So they're across the river, and then it's hard to lure them back to the library. So they're developing plans to really get these kids to continue on with the library, including maybe doing something to add a teen space to the building that's a little bit better than the teen hallway. So it's really great to see what's going on there. Their community room was filled with pastels. They have an Upper Valley Pastel Club, which anybody is interested in some amazing community art. I was so impressed by the artwork there. So it was really a hopping place. And yeah, that's a library that until 1976 was just a small one-room library, and the community has grown it, and it's really thriving. So it's wonderful to see. And that was our second Capital for a Day, I think, since the last time we met. Back at the end of February, Tom McMurdo and I visited the Johnson Public Library and the Morristown Centennial Library, along with our two folks from the Capital program, Hannah and Mark. And that was part of the Capital for a Day in Lamoille County. And we were able to see the Johnson Public Library temporary space, which is underneath the church, and it's bright and airy, but a little bit freezing cold. They always wear coats. They don't really have heat. And that's where they've been locating their library services since their facility was flooded in 2023. And they will be moving the entire old historic library. It's already been cut off the foundations. I went over to see it this weekend with Joy. We were in the car together, and we went over to get the library there in Johnson. And they've cut the foundation, and they've got these steel I-beams through it, and they're going to bring in these special building moving devices that are kind of just robots on wheels, and they will drive down the street, and then they will turn left, and then they will turn right, and they will go across a bridge, and they have to lower power lines and take off lights on the bridge, and then they will plop this building down on a new foundation right next to the school and next to the pizza oven. They have a community pizza oven in Johnson. So that move is happening on the 26th of April, and I have a feeling the whole town's going to come out and cheer for the library while it moves very, very slowly down the road. I think it's starting in the middle of the night, so there are some daytime watching opportunities. And another thing that has happened since we last met, you may have seen some news stories about Rutland Public Library, and there's a lot of conversation about keeping the current building, moving to a different location. What should they do there? How much does it cost? So I went down to provide information to the community for one of a series of community meetings back in January. And I was able to share some information about best practices with libraries to try to explain modern library service, and not to influence them one way or another with their decisions, but just to have that information about what, if you were building a new library today, what would you be trying to do with like flexible furnishings and sight lines and easy to maintain spaces. And so that conversation carries on in the community, and we'll of course be ready to support them or any other libraries that ask us to give information at a community meeting. But it was really great to see how many people cared about it. And I know that it's gotten a little bit contentious at times, but I always see that as a sign that people really are passionate about the library when they, if you don't argue about something you don't care about. So I'm sure that they'll come to a good conclusion for their community. And the final thing I wanted to share is that this week is National Library Week. So get out there and wave your National Library Week flags because it's happening. And this year we kicked it off with a really special screening of Free for All, a movie about public libraries in our country. And it's going to air on Vermont Public. I believe it will start airing on the 29th of April. And I want to say Adrian was there. So the Board of Libraries was represented. It was great to see Adrian in person.
Oh.
And Karen and Joy were there on, Karen and Joy and I on our weekends were out there for the viewing. And then I participated in a panel following the screening. Some of the things that I think are really important to learn about were really the public accommodation laws in libraries, the protests around libraries that took place in our country in the 60s. The documentary does a really great job of explaining library service to immigrants, library services to the communities, library services to African American folks, how library services have not been equal, and how that's something that we really strive toward. And so I found it really to be very powerful. And then on a personal note, there was a lot of footage of my colleagues and my old haunts in San Francisco, which is where I think the documentary is where it started. And I swear they were videoing people for 10 years. So it was interesting to see people's younger selves. You'd see a staff member who had retired like 5 years ago from SFPL, but she was at the desk on the 5th floor. And it was the documentary opens with people rushing into the library in San Francisco, and it's a view I know so well, having worked there for so many years. And so that was really kind of poignant to see some of my colleagues, one of whom had passed away, and it was really an interesting movie for a lot of reasons, but it had some personal notes for me. Oh, and one other thing I want to mention, this didn't make it into the body of the report, but our department is always trying to stay engaged and help out colleagues. And one of the things that happened over the weekend was that Joy and Josh participated in Vermont History Day. And I understand from Joy that the performance presentations by children were quite interesting. And one little girl just stood there singing for quite some time in Italian. And then another child did a report about Shostakovich and the impacts of the Soviet regime on Shostakovich's works. And then when he kind of conformed and aligned with that oppressive regime. So it's very interesting to see how kids are kind of responding to current events and to hear about that from Joy. And I know Joy and Josh do this almost every year. So, they're always looking for more judges for History Day. So if History Day sounds interesting, listening to a kid, middle grade or high school grade, deliver a presentation on a well-researched topic that they've worked on with a mentor and competing against one another to go on to the next level. Board members, if any of you think that sounds fun, let me know and I can pass your name along to our colleagues at the Vermont Historical Society. I do want to say the Vermont Historical Society team has been absolutely supportive of the department, and they also receive funding from IMLS, but they recognize that our funding is of a larger scale and not just one time, and they've really helped to raise awareness of what's going on with IMLS. So I just want to share appreciation for the Historical Society and also mention that this Thursday, the Historical Society has reserved the card room at the State House, and there will be some activities there about libraries and museums and how they're necessary. And so I plan to be there for part of the day on Thursday. And the State House is a welcoming space for anyone. So if anybody wants to stop by to support libraries and museums, please feel free. That is my whole long-winded report.
Is that open to is that a public event or is that for the Senate and House members, or what's kind of the audience for that?
The audience is typically, it's an opportunity to talk with whoever happens to be at the State House that day. So it's an opportunity for people to kind of share information with the senators and legislators. But, it is also always open to the public. And sometimes folks will come because they know that there will be certain groups presenting in the card room. And it's usually just a tabling type of an opportunity. So
Well, that was a lot. It was a lot of information to take in for sure. I know Adrian had told me that she went to the I don't even remember what it was called, so I apologize,
Free
but
for all documentary
yeah, sounded like a good time.
discussion.
Yeah, and I look forward to seeing the documentary when I have that ability. It sounds really interesting. And I'm glad that the board was represented, Adrian, for sure. Yeah, it was kind of
Yeah.
far away.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it
don't know
was
if anybody.
sponsored by Vermont Public. Yeah, and
Mhm.
it touched on many different things about libraries and did a overview as well of the history of libraries in the United States and funding and community support, and it also looks at some of the challenges historically as outlined by Kathy, but also that carry on to today, different things of the library landscape, um, different issues in libraries. So it's worth watching when it airs on Vermont Public or the PBS channel that you watch at the end of the month. And then also having the panel discuss a lot of things, including like a lot of the invisible hard work that libraries do for the communities, often invisible, not always acknowledged, but how much they support communities and how they are great as community spaces. And one of the few last spaces that are free, that anyone can come and find information or connect with others or explore topics. And so, yeah, it was great to see,
Sure.
a variety of folks there from all different kind of aspects of libraries, public librarians, school librarians, state librarians, volunteers, friends of the library.
That's
And
I
cool.
think that the count of attendees at that activity was 80. Oh, Joy just put that in the chat. Yeah, 80 people came out for that event. It was really nice.
That is.
absolutely. Yeah. It's not easy to condense a lot about libraries, and we saw a shortened version of like about an hour, but it is longer. But it is, to cover so much about libraries, topics you've heard a lot about in the news, book bans or challenges, to other topics that you might not think about as often, unless perhaps you have experience in a library.
It sounds
But
really
yeah,
interesting.
and to see, who's using the library and how whatever happens right now with the federal funding, or how that might shift, how that might impact folks, that the
Mm.
library is huge and significant to their lives and helping people achieve goals. And
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, thank you, Kathy. That was really helpful. Do we know how long the full film is? I don't know. Do you guys know?
No, I actually didn't realize we were only going to see a partial version of the film until we got there and there was this advanced screening notice. I thought we were about to see the full thing. Yeah.
Oh, 83 minutes.
well, not that much difference that they were
No.
editing. Maybe. I mean, there was a little bit of, public acknowledgements of funding sources. So maybe that some of that time is taken up
Yeah.
during the hour. But yeah, definitely worth
Mhm.
seeing again to really digest, but very accessible.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna watch it for sure. Um, okay. I don't know if anybody has any other comments or questions for Kathy about the state librarian report. But if not, we can move on to the item that we added about the open meeting changes. And I know, Tom, you wanted to add it there
Right,
was
I just
a,
wanted to know, because I think you
Yeah.
mentioned to me, Lisa, when we talked, that there were some changes about, but we're dual, so, you
Mhm.
know, for just
Yeah,
advisory committee, what are the rules there versus, um, you know, making decisions? We don't make decisions except for the geographic naming, we do by
Right,
statute, but the rest were
yes,
purely advisory.
mhm, mhm.
right, so,
Kathy? Oh, sorry.
I wanted to remind the board that when the most recent, when the second to most recent set of updates came out from, um, on the topic of open meeting law, that the board, I had asked for the advice of the board about how we wish to run the meetings. And despite the fact that it's, that the board has two different functions, one advising me, so an advisory board, and then the other deciding on geographic naming. So you're a deciding body on geographic naming, and then you're an advisory body as far as advising the state librarian. What you all decided to do, and what my team has been doing, is to follow the guidelines for deciding bodies, because that way there's just one procedure for us to follow as far as noticing meetings, the fact that we have the hybrid. Josh is not just there for fun, he's there because this is a hybrid meeting, because your geographic naming decisions are all scheduled. Your geographic naming topics will all be scheduled on the same dates as your regular meetings. So if we run this board as following the deciding body rules, we're exceeding what needs to be done sometimes, but we're meeting what needs to be done on those occasions where you're exercising your deciding capacity. And for the department, that's the easiest way to do it. Because then Jess and I don't have to think in advance, oh, wait, this meeting is a naming meeting. We have to do X, Y, and Z and have all different things in place. So we're just following the rules for deciding body every single time, unless you decide to do something else. But I would say the department's preference as your administrative support is to just go with the rules for the deciding bodies.
And the only way this would come up, and I'm going off the board, once it's advertised, right, Kathy? Yeah, and then get a replacement, is,
Yeah.
let's say, if Bunch said, oh, we need to get together and just to meet, is it for a picnic or whatever? Right now, you can't do that. So that would be the only thing if they were different. And it would probably be difficult to do that. And that's sort of the only flexibility I was wondering about, because you just don't mention geographic naming at all, but it's just advisory. You get together and chat sometime or have a picnic.
Mhm.
That we can't do that now because that is in violation of the meeting, because we'd have a quorum if more than if four or more of us were together. That's the only way I think that would be take effect.
Yeah, and I think, to tell you, I was talking with Tom about this, and I talked to Kathy and a little bit with Adrian, just sort of like, as the chair for now this year, I was required to watch a video about open meeting law. And, I mean, I've been on boards before, so I'm like, oh yeah, I know pretty much what you need to do. But I found it interesting that it was talking about that, how Kathy said decision making or advisory only. And I had to think about it for a minute to think like, oh, what kind are we? Because we do different things like that. And so when, Kathy said, we do it the most stringent way because it's easier to do it consistently every time. I think that seems to me to be reasonable. So if there is any discussion wanted on the topic, or if you want to see that open meeting law update 2024 video, it's like 37 minutes long. So if you're interested, I can certainly ask Kathy to send you a link.
Yeah, I was not recommending that anything changed, just that there was a clarification of that. So that's fine. That's all.
Mhm. Yeah, it talked about quorums and being mindful of that type of thing and the reasons you can go into executive session, a lot of things that you all
Yeah.
are probably quite familiar with. Oh, there, Kathy put the link in the
Okay.
chat.
Yeah, I put the link
So,
in the chat, and Jess, if you can pop the link into the meeting minutes, that would be helpful too. Only Lisa's required to take the training. So other people, of course, can watch it if they wish to, but as the chair, this is a required training. And it's not in the state CAPS system where all of the board members received training previously. It's just a general URL, so there's no cost associated with it. Unless you're required to take it, I would say the per diem would just apply for the required person, but you're welcome to
that's a
watch
good
it.
point. You think of
Sorry to be
everything.
such a cheapskate, but given the budget and our funding situation.
Oh, bring it right around to the budget.
Yeah, so yeah, there's a case to be made for consistency, and I believe the department's word was simplicity, to keep at the level of non-advisory
Mhm.
to operate. And that makes sense to me to, like, you don't have to think about that report. And it's great also to provide this information to anyone who wants to access it on the website, making things transparent, and that's great as well. It fleshes out some of the meeting minutes. But I also think about situations like there was that great documentary about libraries, and what if more than a couple members join in? Well, they can, but it's not to discuss libraries business or the Board of Libraries business. But that might be a challenge given the topic, but in that particular circumstance.
Right.
But I think that it's great to also connect and take advantage of those kind of opportunities. Or what if a couple of us show up to the, tabling on Thursday at the State House, to be supportive of museums and libraries. And like being careful of those communications, maybe, I don't know if it's ex parte communication, but like or anything that would cause concern for a quorum. But the existence of 3 board members in a space, I don't know, like.
Mm. I mean, I think they just say, be mindful not to discuss business. I mean, it can give an impression to the public, but
Oh yeah, perception is important to
yeah.
consider as well, and as we would for any conflicts.
Yeah.
A perception of a
Linda?
conflict is just as bad as a
Sorry.
conflict sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. It's true. Yeah, Linda, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think we can navigate those few situations where there might be a problem, the picnic or the film screening or the people happen to show up at the same event. I think we can navigate those situations, and I think I'd like to err on the side of, if we're going to err on the side of greater accountability rather than less. So I concur with the decision to keep it as a deciding body rather than try to be both at the same time. Easier on the board, easier on the department, and easier on us too, because we don't have to make those decisions ourselves when 5 of us show up at an event.
Yeah.
It also goes for emails, I guess people can
Mm.
distribute information to folks, but not to have a conversation about it, or distribute information to maybe the state librarian who can share it with the board. But it is unfortunate that when this Act 133 went into effect, that there was a lot of great conversation that could be had, about libraries, to understand them, to give the context for what we might be advising on or listening to. putting it some of the color to, for example, the state librarian's report. We could have a connection to some of these topics as they arise. And it's great to have that communication as well, but we don't want to step on a quorum issue or other issues as well.
No, that's
Although
true.
someone
I think
FOIA'd me for hearing about Weston's, bathroom, well, it's exciting, like I would want someone to be like, oh yeah, they're caring so much, because bringing up libraries up to that level is, it's good, and want to be supportive of libraries too. So it's a difficult thing to navigate, follow the rules and guidance, and doing our best, while also bonding as a board and learning about libraries or discussing. But we want to be mindful of what the law states and that we're in compliance with it.
Linda? Oh,
I think the purpose of the open meeting law is yes, for transparency and yes, to make sure that people know what we're doing. But I also think, we follow it in good faith. Yeah, we might make some mistakes, but we're trying to follow it in good faith, and I think that's what the law expects as well. So I'm comfortable with that.
that's good. I think that's true. We all have to just do the best we can and be transparent and mindful. So anyway, I think that was helpful. And really, I know you don't get a per diem, but really it is interesting and it's a good refresher. So anyway, if there's no other comments, we can move on to the talk about the July meeting.
I had a plan that Jess and I would identify some potential sites and share them with you today, but we have been a bit sidetracked by other activities. So what we'll do is to pick that work up again now, and we'll communicate with folks via email. It's just deciding our meeting location. We're allowed to decide our meeting locations. That's something we're allowed to do. And we're also allowed to discuss topics, to share topics for the agenda through email. So we'll be in touch around that. We were looking to potentially host in central Vermont, if I recall correctly, because that might be easiest for everybody to converge upon central Vermont. But I apologize that this fell off of our or fell to the bottom of our to-do list. So we'll bump it up a little bit so that we have something set up and that we can notice folks, because we'll have a special location for that meeting.
Well, that sounds good. I definitely hope we can figure that out because it would be really nice to see you all in person. It's great that we have virtual meetings and they're really helpful.
Mm.
But I'm the kind of person that likes an in-person meeting. So anyway, well, then I think we're all set. I mean, Kathy, is there anything else we should do? Okay, then I guess, okay, I forgot. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I think it's a
But we don't need to
non-debatable motion.
Yes.
Yes,
Right.
usually I move that we adjourn. That's usually my responsibility. Yes.
Fall asleep. Yes,
Oh,
Bob.
Well, if that's accurate, then we could take a
You
second.
need a second though. You need a second. Yeah.
I second.
There you go.
Okay, quick seconds. Okay, well then, we're adjourned
Then
at
you have to
11:32.
vote. Then you have to vote on it.
No, we have to vote.
Yeah.
No debate, but vote. Okay.
No
All
debate,
in favor.
but you vote. Yep.
Oh my God, I gotta get a copy of Robert's.
That's going to town meetings, contentious town meetings. You learn this stuff.
Right. Okay, all in favor? Raise your
Aye.
hand or say aye.
I
Any opposed? No, okay, motion passes then.
They just
We
stay
are
there. Yeah,
adjourned.
so, yeah.
All right.
Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
See ya.
Okay,
Thank
thank you,
you.
everybody. Well, bye.
I